In a time and place when you can get sexually harassed from anywhere,
two ladies in their mid to late 27s have decided not to.
And they're calling it Workationing's getting the fuck out of libertarianism.
I was never fully in on that.
What's wrong with the liberty movement and why hasn't it been fixed yet?
Will Kari save herself or will Kelly drag her out by her hair?
Not the extensions, Gringa, they're just clip-ins.
This is the Workationing Podcast. You know what? The best part about having a travel podcast is that you get to travel with all of your podcast equipment. And you best believe I get pulled out of line every time. Because apparently podcast equipment looks a whole lot like could be a bomb.
Oh, absolutely. I never carry it because I have other stuff that I carry.
Yeah, we have a division of labor.
Mm-hmm. So you're the one who gets stuck with the podcast equipment and whatever the foreign equivalent of the TSA is.
Yeah. They always are very interested in rubbing their little bomb stick all over it.
My favorite part is when they speak to you in a different language and you get to pantomime microphone.
Yeah.
That doesn't look dirty.
Yeah.
It's like straw and microphone are the two things you don't want to pantomime.
Right. No, this podcast is amazing and I love it. But every single time we go through customs, I'm just like, fuck this podcast.
This was the biggest mistake of my life.
Never doing this shit again.
It's not worth it. It's heavy.
It's so heavy. And then they have to take it all out. And then my backpack is packed so tightly that like I can't just slide it back in. It's like I've got to pull everything out and start over.
You got to start that Tetris all over again.
It's, ugh.
I really like it when it makes fun sizzling sounds when you plug it in.
Yeah, you put it into a little adapter. We got these adapters for these European-ass
weird outlets. Yeah, you plug in the podcast equipment and it sounds like, girl, maybe we do have a bomb.
Yeah, who knows?
Did anybody take this from you?
Right? Columbia style.
Has it been in your sight the whole time? All right, so we are in Prague, and Prague has been unexpected so far.
Yeah, girl. You know, not quite what we thought.
No, it's
not quite what we signed up for.
Not what we anticipated, not what we paid for. That's a different podcast, though.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. I think this time we've had some time to reflect.
On Las Vegas specifically.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to our What Happens at FreedomFest in Vegas Doesn't Stay in Vegas podcast, go through and give that one a listen because it really impacted us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it impacted you more. Yeah.
We had some long conversations after that. So long story short, I think we made the best of it. I don't want to say we had a terrible time in Vegas.
No, I overall had a great time, especially a lot of the ladies that we were hanging out with. I really enjoy a lot of those people. I had a good time. I think for me, it was easier as like an outsider to just see the shenanigans and like, it doesn't affect me on a deep level because that's not my tribe. Like right. I have friends there and people that I really like, but also like overall, that's not really my scene.
Yeah, I mean, some of the libertarian men are just real skeezy assholes. And I've known this for a long time. This was not like new to me. But I travel in small social circles, especially in New Hampshire, where everyone knows who I am, or a lot of people know who I am.
No, the Liberty movement, like I've only even known who any of these people are for like a year, like since you and I started traveling together, because that wasn't a big part of we just weren't as much like you and I were close, but we weren't like a big part of each other's everyday lives.
Right. You lived in Ohio and I lived in New Hampshire.
Yeah. So we would go together and travel places, but we weren't really integrated.
Right.
And so I didn't really, but I feel like I know half of the goddamn Liberty movement at this point.
Mm-hmm. It's not
just
hard.
From hanging out with you for a year. Like, because it's a tight-knit community.
Yeah, but not everyone knows who I am. And certainly we go to places like FreedomFest in Las Vegas and, I'm meeting all kinds of new people. And it doesn't matter if people know who I am. I shouldn't say that. But what I mean by that is I am a fairly serious person, especially with regards to my business.
Yeah.
And especially with regard to the work that I have done to promote libertarian issues and causes.
Right. Well, maybe you should break that down for some of the people because you don't go around advertising that. So like what?
No, it's kind of something that I do in my spare time.
I know.
We've all got our volunteer.
She's a little hobbyist. She's an activist for funsies on the side.
As you do. So I have helped organize protests against police militarization My protest signs have been featured in award-winning documentaries. They have been featured in major media outlets because certainly photographers take photos of them, and then you see them in, name brand media outlets. I have run pro bono PR for several activists who have been arrested. I'm not going to say that the media coverage helped get them out of those situations. Certainly the lawyers did a lot of that heavy lifting. But it never hurts to get a little media embarrassment toward officials who should be embarrassed.
Right. Well, and you've been willing to use your expertise to call attention to issues when you felt they needed to be called attention to.
Right. I have managed PR for several libertarian conferences, including the Free State Project's Liberty Forum, which had Edward Snowden as the keynote speaker.
That was very cool. I remember when that happened.
Yeah, I got CNN out there. There was the Wall Street Journal. There was a lot of name brand media coverage that happened as a result. I also do quite a bit of media consulting and strategy. And yeah, so I kind of do that professionally. Well, I don't kind of do that professionally. I do that professionally, but I also kind of do it on the side for causes that are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
There was a little old lady. This is one of my favorite stories. When I first moved to New Hampshire, there was a little old lady who happened to be a Free Stater who sat on a jury where a guy was facing felony charges and facing decades of prison time for growing marijuana in his backyard. And she nullified that jury, and then I ran PR for that. And jury nullification was a hot topic in the media for a while after that. And most people didn't even know what jury nullification is. Quite frankly, probably still a lot of people.
No, I was going to say you might want to clarify that for people who are like, I totally know what it means, so why don't you just remind me real quick?
So jury nullification is, I guess it's like one of the final checks of power that we have in the United States, where if a jury feels like the law is unjust, and some states make this more explicit than others. New Hampshire allows defense attorneys to specifically bring up jury nullification. In a lot of states that's illegal, although it's still legal to nullify a jury if you feel compelled to and you're on that jury, and you can convince the others. But basically it's a way of continually voting not guilty until the law changes. And so with marijuana, I think that this is, it's legal in a lot of states. It's well known that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol, let's say, which is legal in all 50, even in Utah.
Right.
And so marijuana, nullifying a jury when somebody's facing marijuana charges is a good way to signal to the prosecutors, we're not going to convict people of this particular crime.
So it's like a good way to just be like, yes, we may think that they are guilty of breaking this law, but we don't think that this law should be a law.
Exactly. So we're going to vote not guilty. And that's a right that people have that they should be aware of.
Yeah, that makes sense in a democracy. I like that.
So, I mean, that's one of my favorite things that I've done since being in New Hampshire. But as a result of, I guess, having some media connections and working with a variety of people, certain people know me, right? And they know me as somebody that they can and should respect. And when I was at FreedomFest in Las Vegas, the baseline was not respect from a lot of the men that we encountered.
No, and not just towards, I mean, let's be clear, at a conference, whether it's a political one or one for, a business association or something like that, everyone is there in a professional capacity.
Right.
Like, this isn't Comic-Con, yo.
No, this is not the furry convention.
No.
We're not here for that.
But yeah, I mean, at a conference, the baseline should be a professional level of respect for the other people around you. Because in theory, you're all there because you care about a thing, whether it's project management or the Liberty Movement or whatever the hell your conference is about. Mm-hmm. You're all there because you've come together to make strides on this thing that you all allegedly care about. So, like, you would think there needs to be a base level of respect for your colleagues.
Nah, girl. How about you just get offered to be is it a high-class prostitute that gets flown all over the world?
I mean, I guess so. I'm glad at least somebody thought I was that kind.
He wasn't just trying to toss you 20 for a blowy. So there's that.
Right?
I guess if we're trying to find the silver lining here.
I mean, I wasn't a designer dress, so I think I probably looked expensive, but that Badgley Mishka.
It looked good on you. It looked good on you. I was just wearing standard conference attire when I was approached by a guy who I guess is a big donor and offered to be made his escort for the night. That wasn't a great experience for me. And you and I had a lot of conversations about our experiences with the men at Freedom Fest and just my experiences with the men of the liberty movement in general, or some men of the libertarian movement in general. And you asked me some really tough questions. Like, why do you continue to associate with these people when you know that in a situation, in any given situation where you introduce an outsider, particularly a female, she's probably going to be offended?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to tell you, I personally, even though there are plenty of people in the movement who I consider good friends and who I have a lot of respect for, and I have a lot of respect for the work that they do, and I'm in no way ashamed to call those people my friends and to speak openly about what they do, and the stuff that I think they do is great. But in general, I personally, in terms of my just career and in terms of like being out in the world and meeting people, new people all the time like we do, I personally don't really want it to attach to my name. Like, I don't want libertarianism to attach to me.
Right.
Because there's too much in there that, like, I can't stand behind all of that.
No, certainly not behind a lot of the behaviors that a lot of the men in particular in the movement exhibit on just a way too candid basis. I'm not suggesting that if they hit it, it would be any better. But fuck, man, can you button it up a little bit more?
Yeah, well, and not just that it's tolerated in, like, a cultural way among people, which I do see a lot, but that the worst offenders seem to be really, these people continue to be elevated as the faces of the movement, even though everyone knows all of this like XYZ thing. And listen, the liberty movement is a gossipy ass group.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, but that's just true.
It's true. It is, yeah. It's because
it's so small. Yeah. But I mean, like, trust all these people who are walking around thinking that people don't know their dirt. Listen, I've been around casually for like a year, and I feel like I know everyone's dirt. I don't think these guys think that they're hiding it.
No,
they're not hiding shit. Everybody knows. So then my question is, why are these people continually the speakers at conferences? Why are these people continually the people who get to be the voice of the movement? Why is that? When everyone knows exactly who they are and exactly what they've done.
I have thought a lot about that. I think, and in my experience, right? So it's difficult, and I think that a lot of people listening to this can probably identify or, I guess, empathize. Sometimes you know people who are overwhelmingly good. For example, that friend of mine that I introduced you to, and then I left you alone with him the first time you met. And real quick, he hit you with a, "Can I eat your pussy?"
I will say he reached out with a very sincere and lovely apology and was horrified to recognize himself in that, and was not, I'm not trying to excuse the behavior,
no,
but I'm saying, like, that is a person I consider a friend. The point isn't to like just call it to be crazy and to call out every little thing and to be constantly looking to be offended. Like, that's not who you and I are on any level.
No, not at all. And I mean, the reason why this guy in question reached out to you is because I think he's fundamentally a really good person.
No, he is. He's a great person and a good friend.
Sometimes fundamentally really awesome people say things that are a little off color or that might make somebody feel uncomfortable, and so
certainly not me, Grega.
I know. I have never been known to offend anybody ever.
Right. And if it's just a matter of somebody saying something kind of offensive, that is like very low grade. Like, who among us? I'm not trying to throw stones in that glass house. Let me tell you that.
No, I can see into your house through my glass house.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to throw any stones either. But I guess what I'm getting at here is that sometimes good people do fucked up weird things, And so at what point do you ostracize that person? At what point does saying something kind of offensive become a situation that you need to escalate to the point where you're calling for that person's job, or you're calling for that person to be removed as a speaker from a conference, or whatever other kind of potential consequences might result of some skeezy ass behavior? Right. And so what is that tipping point? And I think that it largely has to come from other men in the movement.
Well, what it starts with is there has to be some kind of accountability to begin with, because right now what I see, and I think a lot of people see, is there's just no accountability across the board, right?
No, I haven't seen a lot of it, to be honest with you.
So when no one's been called out, this is something that it's actually been bothering me about the whole like Me Too movement in general. I actually got the chance to ask this question of Gloria Steinem herself, and she was speaking at OU, and I like, there's question time. So, I was like, yes, girl, I'm going to talk to Gloria. And I basically said to her what I was feeling about the whole Me Too movement in general, which is that like, it seems really kind of fucked up that all of this stuff has been going on forever. Right. And we've all known about it. And I think about the way that I I've known about it. I think a lot of people have known about it. I think that I even just look at my own life and like, in what ways have I let men in powerful positions or people just in powerful positions, how many times have I let people like that get away with things that I wouldn't let other people get away with? Like making some off-color comment, or you know what I mean? Like how many, and so I see it as being such a huge part of our culture. And so then we all decide it's not okay. And then we choose these guys and we call them out. And then those guys in particular, we other them. Then it's like they're a monster of some kind and it's all their fault. It's them, not us. But the patriarchy and all of that is something that we all actively participate in, whether you know you are or not, whether you want to or not. We're all like brought up in it, you know? And so that seems like there should be kind of some kind of a way to hold people accountable, but to also make room for people to be people and allow for the fact that a lot of this stuff, if it was happening in the 80s or the 90s, I'm sorry, but that was a different world.
Yes, it was a much different world.
You know, and so does someone need to lose their entire career? Like, if their lines, you know what I mean? And what Gloria Steinem said, surprisingly, queen feminist of the world, is she was like, yeah, absolutely, I 100% agree with you. And she's like, I think there needs to be a next wave of like feminist analysis of this movement, because a lot of these main points are getting lost. You know, in a way, the feminist message is almost getting lost, because if the message is they're these boogeymen who are these awful dudes who just did these terrible things and that's our problem, that's literally not our problem. That's a symptom of the problem, is that men in positions of power can get away with a lot. And so I think a lot of people, if you look into your heart, do you not get away with just about what you can get away with?
Not me.
Could have let that one slide.
I'm sure some people identify with what you just said.
Right. Someone out there. So I think it's not that those people shouldn't be held accountable, but it's a much bigger issue. And in a way, we're losing the message that the actual change that needs to occur is something that needs to happen like holistically as a culture, not just like, we don't just need to like burn these 5 guys at the stake and then like, oh, we did it.
Right.
Like we solved this problem. But Gloria also said, she actually brought up that there's a Ghanaian culture that people, when they seriously fuck up, they get sent away from the village. And that's the worst thing that you can do, is to like shun people.
Right.
However, that's for a set amount of time they're shunned from the village. And then after a certain amount of time and after they've like paid their penance, they get to come back, and not just come back, but be fully reintegrated into the society. And that starts with a ritual where everyone in the village comes and tells you what they like about you. And I just thought that was kind of a nice story.
Is it like, I like your shirt today?
I mean, maybe it is.
Because I still haven't forgiven you for all the shitty things you said.
Derek.
Derek, goddammit.
I don't forget. I don't forget, Derek.
Your new haircut is less bad than the last one,
Right.
Derek.
Right. But I do think we need to figure out a way to, I don't think anything of what we're saying is that these men, like, we don't want to destroy anyone or like ruin anybody's life or anything like that. But it starts with accountability.
It does. And it starts with, in the moment, people need to be shut the hell down when they're, you know, what happened to you? That think tank executive commented on your quote unquote tits and how great they were in front of 3 other men, and none of them said anything, and you were just trying to leave the conversation because he had already made you feel uncomfortable.
No, and there was no way that I had, you know me, I always think that I have a poker face. I have no poker face whatsoever. Every feeling I've ever had in my life has been written plainly across my face.
This is true.
And I am certain that I did not look the picture of a lady who was enjoying that conversation.
No.
I'm sure I had all kinds of stank on my face, and that group of like 5 dudes all just laughed and were just like, haha, whatever. And I was just like, all right, well, fuck y'all, I'm out of here.
That's a problem. That's a cultural problem. And I have seen that happen, or, you know, not that exact commenting on a woman's breasts story, but something very similar to it. I've seen that scene play out so many times. And so many times I've been the one to stand up, but it's not as powerful coming from a lady when clearly the guy already doesn't respect the woman, or doesn't respect women in general if he's treating them like that.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second, and I think that that's just kind of a cultural issue. It's a cultural problem within libertarianism, but also I'll call it the liberty movement, right? Which also encompasses anarchists, anarcho-capitalists.
Well, you know what a lot of that comes up down to, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, but as an outsider, this is what it looks like to me, is that I have had all kinds of people tell me in the liberty movement that they're, including women, actually, that tell me that there is no such thing as male privilege. And I think that, at least what it looks like to me, is that a side result of a lot of the free market stuff, and I think a lot of it's kind of honestly maybe an elementary understanding of what that might mean, makes people feel like something like male privilege can't exist, because if it does exist, or like the wage gap exists, or if any of that exists, the free market isn't actually going to fix that. And so it's easier for people to just say that's not a problem. Like, I don't know if that's what it is, but there's a shocking amount of people in the liberty movement who will look you in your face and tell you that there is no such thing as privilege.
Right. I've seen that too.
And I'm just like, well, okay. I mean, you can believe that, but I think it makes it harder for these kinds of issues to be something that people take seriously, because if you're really like, well, there's no such thing as privilege, or there's no such thing as male privilege, then it's really hard to identify that as being the problem if you don't even think that's a thing.
I also think that the liberty movement, like the focus is on the individual, right? And on individual rights. And so as long as you're not violating the NAP, the non-aggression principle,
right,
which gets thrown around quite a bit, then, you know, you're not aggressing on anybody, whatever. You don't have a right to not be offended. I've heard that a bunch too. And that's true. Right?
You do have a right to, I mean, you don't have a right to not be offended. I totally agree with that. But that doesn't go to say that someone treating you that way, and because so many people responded to that last podcast by just being like, well, that man was just offering you money in return for services and you said no, and that sounds like free markets to me. Do you hate capitalism?
This podcast got posted to the libertarian subreddit. Our last podcast episode. I think if you were to do a Reddit search for "this is why there aren't more women in the liberty movement," I think it comes up. But that was a heated debate. There were lots of comments on that, and a lot of it exactly was...
He was just presenting us with a contract, which we declined. So you know, apparently I'm communist. I don't know. Like, that was...
If a guy on the street offers you a churro and you say no, you know...
Right. And what they're not recognizing is, yes, I don't think that I have the right to not be offended. I do think that I have the right to not be aggressed upon. And that is aggressive. Like, treating someone in a way that you think that you can buy their body from them without them ever letting you know that that was an option. That's aggressive.
Right.
You know what I mean? If I have let you know that that's a thing I'm down for and you would like to make me an offer, that's a whole other thing.
Right.
But that is aggressive. Treating somebody like that is aggressive, and you're not non-aggressing anyone with that.
So I think that there are a couple of issues that converge in this shitty Venn diagram to cause the kind of issues that we're seeing in the liberty movement. Everything that we just said with the side of, and I can't tell if the alt-right came from the liberty movement, or if alt-right types just seem to think that the liberty movement is a good place for them to camp out sometimes. Ditto the red pill crowd.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a chicken and the egg thing. I
feel like angry white men, the whole concept really came out of the liberty movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially with liberty movement, the anarchist movement, there are a lot of angry white dudes. Mm-hmm. I gotta say. It's not all of them at all, but there is, and I think it is a subsect of the group. It's not everybody at all. Mm-hmm. But I think that this culture of non-accountability that has really run rampant in the liberty movement creates a haven for people like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of them interpret it as the liberty movement endorsing them and you know what I mean?
100%. It looks like an endorsement when you're letting these people come and speak at your conference.
Yeah, when you're elevating people who you know are scammers, who have taken money from people, who speak horribly about women, who have assaulted people.
And then you have the audacity to go and put them on a panel with like legit people?
Right. Right. And then the women get like a token spot and then aren't even really taken seriously and are spoken over the entire time.
That was the worst.
No, because that was the thing I saw with FreedomFest with that whole weekend, was that we knew a lot of ladies who were on panels, but a lot of them, it seemed like, got added at the last minute because they were like literally just looking for a woman to add, because it's an afterthought. Like, oh yeah, we should probably get a chick up there. And I'm like, I am looking around here. The best thing about FreedomFest to me was that I got to spend a weekend with a bunch of just really kick-ass, intelligent, fun ladies who are doing really important things in the space that I actually have a lot of respect for. And it's not like there's not a wealth of women that they could choose from.
100%. So why don't they have their own speaking spots? Why, when they're on a panel, are they constantly talked over or not introduced until 20 minutes into the talk? That was the worst part of Angela Keaton's
No, that was
panel
horrible. Or treated like the secretary. It was shocking. And it was a consistent thing that we saw over the panels and the whole time, basically.
And we have a lot of experience with conferences because we manage PR and social media for them quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything like it before.
No.
To this extent?
No, and the women all know. I mean, we sat with a bunch of women in our hotel room and told all of these stories. You know, everyone had their stories, some more horrifying than others, but everyone had tons. Everyone knows this. And everyone has stories about, you know, being told, especially women, they were going to be paid for something and then they weren't paid for it. You know, they show all the way up to this conference and then they don't get what they were told. There's just like a level of just insane disrespect for women in general, just like across the board.
And I've talked to some pretty prominent men in the movement who are well respected, and I've talked to them about this. Why don't you? Because they ask me, well, what do you think we should do?
Well, gosh, I don't know.
You know, I can't imagine. Is what
Where would we even start?
You know, I called you hoping you'd have the answer, sir. No, I don't say that. I say that you need to speak the hell up. When you see something, you've got to say something, and you've got to call it out then, because then that lady knows that at least somebody's got her back, and it's not this disrespect isn't pervasive throughout the whole movement. It's just that one individual asshole who doesn't know how to act right.
Well, and how many times would it really take, especially if the people who are the leaders of the movement and the libertarians and all of that, if enough of those men just made it their policy that you don't say that kind of shit in front of them, and if they started calling people out when they heard things were going on and that sort of thing, how many times would they really even have to do that?
It would put a quick stop to it.
Right. If you can't do it with impunity anymore, it's not as fun.
So I asked, it's not as fun. No. So I asked, I was talking to this one libertarian that I'm pretty close friends with. And I knew that, you know, he had some issues of his own, going back to the sometimes good people say and do bad things or not great things. And he didn't say this, but the impression that I got, and it kind of snapped in my head when I heard it, and all of a sudden it just like, it made so much more sense. I suspect that the reason why a lot of these guys don't call out other guys for skeezy, shady, misogynist shit in the movement is because to some extent they're a little bit guilty too.
Right. I think that another part of it where you go with this too is that I think a lot of them don't want to call out some of these dudes because they recognize that there's an overlap in their audience with, you know what I mean? That they probably have a shared audience with this individual.
And so they don't want to turn off that person's segment of the very small libertarian pool.
Well, and this is the fucking position you get yourself into when you give the keys to the kingdom to a bunch of fucking skeezy skeezers. Because now to get rid of these guys, to oust these guys, I think that a lot of men who aren't necessarily even the targets of this are going to take a little damage. You know what I mean? They're going to have to get rid of these guys. And like that sucks and all, but like maybe you shouldn't have let them get up there in the first place.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, or what the fear is that if a prominent male in the community calls out another prominent male in the community, then the finger pointing is going to begin. And you know, what about all those times you were drunk at conferences and telling people about their daddy issues? Or, you know, what about that intern you hired that's a secret girlfriend?
Right.
That you pay less, maybe, than her male counterpart, allegedly.
The tea is hot.
The tea is hot. We know dirt, though.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's something that
but
everyone
I do think
is aware
that's
of.
what keeps a lot of these guys from actually calling out the people they should be calling out, is because they're afraid of what's going to come out for them. And I'm like, well,
yours is less bad. How about that?
That's why I think it's so important just in general. You and I talk about this all the time. You got to keep your grift clean, people. Skeletons in your, like, acting up, skeletons in your closet, that shit doesn't go away.
No, people remember it. People talk about it.
It's about to be 2018.
There might be video of it.
Right. And that sucks and all. But the other thing is that I don't feel a lot of these guys, the stuff that they're trying to cover up, I'm like, this is shit that you did out loud and in public. So like,
sorry you were drunk and don't know how to control yourself.
Well, and I don't feel bad about calling somebody out for shit that they did in front of a bunch of other people. I'm like, well, apparently you didn't think it needed to be a secret when you talked about my tits in front of a dozen people.
Right.
It wasn't a secret then.
Mm-hmm. But what, now you're ashamed of that behavior?
Now it's a secret?
Are you real sorry?
Right.
Or are you just real sorry that you're embarrassed publicly?
Right.
So the guys in the movement really need to get their act together. I have to tell you, because after our last podcast episode went live, we got so much feedback
Tons.
I have emails, I have messages, I have had long phone calls with all kinds of people who have been sexually harassed at their jobs at libertarian think tanks, who have been beaten as a partner, you know, in a domestic violence kind of situation by their husbands or partners who are also high ups at think tanks. Apparently, there's just like some drug use causing people to act up.
Yeah.
In not good ways.
You'll have that.
But what, it's all swept under the rug?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that if nobody's, I think that the problem is that there are some people, some real assholes who are getting away with some really violent and toxic and horrible behavior at the very top. But I think that there's enough people just below that who are doing shit that's just kind of shady, just hiring their girlfriends and not paying them enough and... You know?
Yeah.
The lower level shit. And then but the thing is like suddenly everybody can get away with everything. People can go to these conferences and do all the drugs and get all kinds of fucked up and do all kinds of fucked up shit. And it doesn't really matter because no one is going to hold you accountable. Everyone's going to forgive you because they have to, because they're all, and I have to say that was the messiest conference I've ever been to. Like, I've just never seen people act like that.
Oh, that was cleaner than last year's, I would say.
But that's another thing. Like, I don't want it attached to my name. I don't really want to be a big part of it because people get a bad perception of the liberty movement. And some of that I feel like is unfair, but a lot of it is just, there's some truth there. There's enough there to make it stick.
Well, and I really care about libertarianism in general. I have been involved in libertarianism for more than 15 years. Somehow I'm still only in my mid to late 27s.
Somehow.
It's been a little while.
Just the blessings of God.
I've been in this community and really caring about it. And I would love to see the ideas of liberty move forward. I think that there are really strong points to the idea that you should be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And maybe we shouldn't be throwing all of these people in jail for nonviolent crimes. And how much does that cost taxpayers? And how much better could that money be spent? And all of these questions, right, that are very valid questions and need to be asked and answered. And that's currently not being done by the two-party system that we have in the U.S.
Yeah, no, it's really hard for me because, like, I tend to be more liberal, but it's really difficult for me to call myself a Democrat and to vote for Democrats because I don't, and what I don't see among liberals is they've got all the feelings in the world for everyone and which bathroom they get to use and all of that, nothing but empathy and outpouring of emotion until you get to like, well, maybe we should dismantle the war machine. And hey, did you know Barack Obama dropped a bomb every 20 minutes? And then everybody's just like, yeah, but he talks so pretty.
Mm-hmm. You know, better than Trump.
Yeah, exactly. And when you start actually talking about dismantling the war machine, even the most liberals are just kind of like, well, like not really, though, right? Like, we're still going to keep voting for these assholes. And that sucks.
Yeah, my brother-in-law works at a defense contractor. Are you saying he's going to be put out of work?
Right.
You know? So all of these things are very valid points and issues that more people should be concerned by and with and be working toward some sort of change. And what I see in the liberty movement is a lot of people working to create that change. I really love that. That's what drew me in. That's what made me passionate about it and why I have devoted so much of my free time to advancing the ideas of liberty in the best ways that I know how. And I'm just done because I've worked so hard. I've had so many conversations with men in the movement, and there's just a lot of like head in the sand.
Yeah.
And like I said, I swear, I think that a lot of it boils down to the guys don't want to get called out themselves.
Yeah.
Because they've got some skeletons in their closet and, you know, they don't want them to be dragged out.
Well, and it's a problem. I mean, it's going to hurt. The problem with this Me Too thing, and there's kind of a whole cultural shift going on, is that it's gonna suck. Because when you have a culture that enables that kind of behavior, there aren't a lot of people whose hands are clean. Because people do tend to kind of get away with what they can get away with. I think that's pretty common in human behavior.
Right. Well, I'm just over it. And out of all the headspace I have, I don't need to be devoting any more of it to this, I don't think.
No, I think it's the right move. I think that there are women that we've met through the movement who we have aligned with, and like I'm excited to see how those friendships and partnerships can be fruitful for us in working towards causes that we're passionate about going forward. But I think that's more on an individual level.
Yeah, I'm going to take a break from libertarianism and from politics in general and just kind of step back. And I tried really hard to kind of shift some things culturally. I tried it in a small area with the Free State Project. Wasn't really geeked about what I saw there. And seeing it on a larger scale at FreedomFest again this year, and especially with you.
Yeah.
I got to see things through your eyes a little bit. It's a problem that I can't solve by myself. It's a problem that I don't want to be subjected to anymore, more than anything.
Right.
I will not go to another libertarian conference until I'm confident that I'm not going to be treated like a prostitute when I show up wearing a fancy dress.
Right? It's Vegas. Give me a sequin. Like, let a bitch live.
I know. So, onward and upward, and maybe at some point I'll circle back to it, but I'm not going back to New Hampshire. I will not go back to the Free State Project, which I signed up for 15 years ago.
Well, and I know that's a really big step for you. I know that this has had a really profound impact on you.
It has. And I mean, when we first met, we were in Pittsburgh, and I told you that I was moving to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And you've kind of been with me through that phase of my life of transitioning to being more of an activist and living in New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, but now also kind of transitioning away from that. And I think that it's healthier for me to not be in an environment where women are treated with such disrespect so frequently.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Because, like, life is too short, and we talk so much about living intentionally, and I don't think that those are things that you need to choose to have be a regular part of your life.
No, not anymore. You can choose whatever you want to have in your life, right? And so for me, this whole year has been about evaluating my entire life, looking at what serves me, what does me good, and allocating more of my time and energy in those areas, and then conversely looking at, what areas of my life don't serve me at all and what needs to go, and then kind of unceremoniously chopping those parts of my life out.
Right.
And
that it always hurts a little, but it's also like really, really great once you've done it.
It feels kind of freeing, actually.
Yeah.
Talking about freedom.
Talking about freedom.
Okay, so let's wrap this one up because we need to tell the people about Prague.
Yes, we do.
You guys are in for a treat.
Just a real treat.
In the ghetto.
We haven't gotten hostiled yet, but no promises.
Okay.
This has been another episode of the Workationing Podcast. If you like what you've heard here, please consider donating at patreon.com/workationing. That's patreon.com. All proceeds will go towards funding our bucket list items.
To keep up with us in real time, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Workationing. Or on our website at, you guessed it, workationing.com. That's workationing.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. In a time and place when you can get sexually harassed from anywhere,
2 ladies in their mid to late 27s have decided to. Oh, no. That's the opposite of what we decided.
No.